Our scripture reading today is from Matthew, the 13th chapter. The same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the lake. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there while the crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow. As he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on the good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen." Then the disciples came and asked him, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" He answered, "To you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For to those who have, much will be given, and they will have in abundance. And from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. The reason I speak to them in parables is that, seeing they do not perceive, and hearing they do not listen, nor do they understand. With them, indeed, is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah that says, 'You will indeed listen, but never understand. You will indeed look, but never perceive. For this people's heart has grown dull, and their ears are hard of hearing, and they have shut their eyes, so that they may not look with their eyes and listen with their ears, and understand with their heart and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches what is sown in the heart, and this is what was sown on the path. As for what was sown on the rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, yet such a person has no root, but endures only for a while. And when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, that person immediately falls away. As for what was sown among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the lure of wealth choke the word, and it yields nothing. But as for what was sown in the good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30. May these words be to us our light and life. Well, after Jan's sermon, I almost feel like I don't need to be up here anymore talking to you. I really enjoyed what she did with the children. But I am a vocabulary geek, so I really enjoy learning new words. I especially like words that open up whole new areas of thought for me. And that's what this next word did. The word is agnotology. Agnotology, and it's a newly coined word based on the Greek agnosis, meaning not knowing, plus the suffix ology, which is the study of. Agnotology is the study of ignorance. Agnotologists, and I'm drawing here from the work of a man named Robert Proctor, explain that ignorance is not as simple as we might at first think. There are different kinds of ignorance, and Proctor uses 3 distinct categories. First, ignorance is a native state. Think of the blank slate attributed to children. Second, ignorance is the result of selective choice. That is, we focus on what interests us and we ignore the rest. And third, ignorance is deliberately engineered, culturally produced as a strategic ploy. It is about the deliberate use of misinformation to create doubt. Because we have been rather ignorant about ignorance, we tend not to make these distinctions, but assume that the first category is the only one. That is, ignorance is a native state, one that can be fixed by education, like babies being born without knowing language, but then they gradually learn it. When ignorance is understood as a natural state, then it's assumed that what's missing is information. A person just doesn't have all the facts. And you fix that by providing accurate information. You present the facts. Well, that's self-evident. It's easy. So why do some people persist in believing that the earth is only 6,000 years old? Because that doesn't reckon with that third kind of ignorance. The kind that is strategically fostered through the intentional creation of doubt and the deliberate use of misinformation. And the playbook that was written on that was by the tobacco industry. From the 1950s onward, Big Tobacco manufactured two products: cigarettes and doubt about the hazards of smoking. Following an explosion of information and evidence that cigarettes were killing tens of thousands of people every year, the tobacco industry launched a multi-million-dollar, multi-year campaign to create reasonable doubt about the evidence. Tactics included claims that the hazard had not yet been proven, that solid evidence was lacking, solid science was lacking, and that more laboratory tests were needed to resolve the controversy. The industry goal was to keep the question of health hazard open for decades, if possible. Interminable controversy had the value of keeping smokers smoking and legislators pliable. Big Tobacco worked hard to disestablish facts through such key strategies as red herring research that sought other causes for lung cancer, white papers that repeated the "no one really knows" claims, and studies that proposed alternatives to the cigarette theory. Not surprisingly, when a Harris poll asked the American public, after several years of this, if any actions could be taken to prevent lung cancer, more than half of them said no. Why didn't they know? Because they were stupid? No, because deliberate and calculated steps had been taken to confuse them. So at this point, you're probably thinking two things. Climate change deniers reek of these tactics. And when am I going to start talking about the parable of the sower? To which I say, yes, you should be thinking about climate change deniers. It's obvious that they've been using the Big Tobacco playbook. And we've been talking about sowing all along, but sowing doubt and misinformation. And maybe that can give us a different way of coming at the parable of Jesus. Jesus wants to teach people about God. So from this perspective, we can see that God is present in our lives like a sower casting seeds into our minds to guide us in our choices. You and I are metaphors for where it lands. We are the path, the rocky ground, the thorns, the good soil. And how we receive those impulses from God determines whether they are easily plucked from us, fail to take root, are choked by distraction, or grow within us abundantly. But we live in a world where good seed is not the only kind sown. And since we have to make constant decisions about how to live and who to believe and who to vote for, it is probably good to be as aware of that bad seed out there. There are sowers of doubt who cast seeds of misinformation, and maybe we can use the parable to guide us with these bad seeds as well. In this scenario, we turn the parable on its head. In this case, we don't want to be the good soil. We don't want to be susceptible to lies and manipulation. In our upended version, Satan is the sower, and we don't want any of what he's throwing out. Let it land on rocky ground, please, where it can't take root. And sticking with this upended version a little longer, what would that rocky ground be? What strategic tactic can we take to protect our minds from the deliberate repetition of lies, a ploy used to make lies so familiar that they start to sound like truth? What makes us impervious to deceit? I'm reminded of an old gospel song. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other else is sinking sand. Okay, so maybe that was a stretch. But it makes the point. When sorting out truth from lies, it is our rock-solid commitment to God's truth that helps us discern what we let grow in us and what we prevent from taking root. And God's truth is no mystery. We know it from the teachings of Jesus. We know it from the prophets. It's a commitment to social and economic justice. It's reverence for life, a compassion for those who suffer, codified in the Bible as concern for the stranger, the widow, the orphan, those at the margins of society. A society is deemed to be just or corrupt according to how it treats the least of these within it. God's truth is a far cry from the deliberate propagation of ignorance. For one thing, God's goals are different. God aims at peace through justice and at a distributive justice that is concerned with the dignity and well-being of all. The goals of those who propagate ignorance are, frankly, venal and self-serving. If they can get us to act against our best interest in what we purchase or how we vote, then they have made their goal. I use big tobacco as my example, but it's incredibly important to be aware of these tactics during an election year. An appeal to fear can be more powerful than an appeal to reason. Although a candidate will try hard to dress up naked fear-mongering as reasonable fear. And it's common for candidates to cast doubt on their opponent's abilities. But we need to ask ourselves, is this a legitimate criticism, or is it a deliberate strategy of misinformation intended to mislead and manipulate voters? And it's even more complicated than that, isn't it? Because we know this strategy of misinformation can be intensely personal, too. Governments and corporations use the intentional production of ignorance at the institutional level, but people use it in personal relationships, especially when they try to conceal their actions from others in the family or workplace. And we do it to ourselves, too, when we refuse to see through our self-produced doubts and deceptions. Whether the work of institutions, other persons, or ourselves, this kind of ignorance is propagated by sowing fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Overcoming it is hard. A mere statement of facts is seldom enough. But maybe the parable of the sower can help. Not my upended version, but the way Jesus taught it. The parable of the sower encourages us to consider our receptiveness to God. Where in our actions and dreams are we open to God's presence? Where in our stubborn beliefs or behaviors do we block ourselves from that knowledge? What choices will we make that will render us more receptive? The sowers of doubt can teach us something too. These folks are nothing if not focused and determined. They set a goal and they hammer at it year after year, using all of the resources at hand to make their point. In the language of the parable, they keep casting that seed. There is no toss it out there once and see if it lands. They never stop. Surely, God is as persistent. The sower never ceases, even if the ground is always shifting. Today you may be on rocky ground, tomorrow in the thorns. But God never stops offering seeds of hope and possibility, imaginative ways forward, drawing you into the depth and richness of your own creative ground. That's what we want rooted in us. The alternative ever and always offered to us by God. Because there's another truth at work here. The better we are able to face the truth in ourselves, the better we will be at sorting out truth from deception and the outright lies thrown at us by those who would sow in us ignorance, fear, and doubt, who pervert medicine to keep us smoking, who pervert science to keep us in denial about climate change, who pervert politics to keep us afraid, who pervert governance to keep us from legislating for the common good. There is an alternative. It is found in the teachings of Jesus and the prophets, and it is measured according to how well we treat the marginalized and poor. There's no red herring. There's no theory. There's no controversy. It's the gospel truth, and of that there is no doubt.